Mephibosheth, the cripple who became a restored prince. Mephibosheth, a striking figure in the Bible, is presented as the son of Jonathan, the heir of Saul, and grandson of the first king of Israel. His story begins amid tragedies, as he lost his father, grandfather, and uncles in a battle against the Philistines. This context sowed the seeds of a unique and challenging journey for young Mephibosheth. The story of Mephibosheth begins in the depths of genealogies, and the roots that intertwine with the history of Israel. He is a sprout growing in the fertile soil of the lineage of Jonathan, Saul's heir. His name echoes through the generations, carrying with it the promise of a royal lineage. Mephibosheth, from a young age, found himself immersed in a context marked by tragedies. The battle against the Philistines was not just another battle, it was a watershed moment that shaped his destiny in unexpected ways. His father, Jonathan, a valiant warrior, met his death on the battlefield, leaving behind a legacy and a responsibility that would fall on the young shoulders of Mephibosheth. The loss of Jonathan, however, was not the only scar that the war left on the young man's life. His grandfather, Israel's first king, Saul, also perished in the conflict, along with Mephibosheth's uncles. The young heir found himself enveloped in grief, carrying the weight of a tragedy that unfolded before his innocent eyes. Genealogies, often seen as mere records of names and lineages, come to life when we realize that the tapestry of Mephibosheth's existence is woven into them. Each link, each name, is a thread that makes up the fabric of your unique and challenging journey. It is in the depths of these roots that we find the seeds of its future greatness. Mephibosheth, still a child, had to face the pain of loss and the premature responsibility that the tragedy imposed on him. However, it is in stories marked by challenges that we often find the strength and resilience to overcome adversity. Mephibosheth, in the corridors of the royal palace, playing like a 5-year-old child, is caught by surprise when his nurse, in an act of desperation and love, carried him with her as she fled the tragic news that shook her family. However, fate, unpredictable and sometimes cruel, intervened mercilessly. The little child, just 5 years old, was swallowed up by tragedy when he slipped from the protective arms of his mistress, culminating in a fall that left permanent consequences. Mephibosheth became crippled in both feet. The journey of hope became a challenge of overcoming, marked by the physical and emotional scars that would accompany Mephibosheth for the rest of his life. Anguish and discomfort became his constant companions as he faced the challenges posed by his condition in a peculiar city called Lodebar. Located on the border of Gilead, this city, although the name might suggest desolation, was not devoid of historical importance. Mephibosheth, now a resident of Lodebar, found himself involved in an environment that contrasted with his childhood memories of a prosperous home. Faced by physical limitations, he faced the harsh reality of life in a place that, despite its peculiarities, had its own history and complexity. Each day, Mephibosheth explored the labyrinthine streets of Lodebar, encountering diverse people, each carrying their own stories and challenges. However, even in the midst of Lodebar's apparent obscurity, sparks of hope began to emerge in Mephibosheth's life. As he walked through the dusty alleys, he heard of a distant king, David, who had ascended the throne of Israel. Stories of this monarch's justice and compassion began to circulate, and Mephibosheth felt a spark of optimism light up within him. In his search for meaning and purpose, Mephibosheth began to glimpse the possibility of a new twist in his life. The city of Lodebar, with its limitations and challenges, became the stage where hope began to bloom again in the crippled young man's heart. As the dust from Lodebar's paths settled on his worn sandals, Mephibosheth longed for an encounter that could transform his destiny. And so, amid the streets of Lodebar, where the scorching sun revealed the marks of the arduous journey, Mephibosheth remained, waiting for the next chapter of his life to unfold before him. Fate still had surprises in store, and the story of the crippled man from Lodebar was far from reaching its end. The story takes on a new dimension when David, already established as king of Israel, seeks to fulfill an old alliance made with Jonathan, the father of Mephibosheth. Demonstrating a rare attitude towards the customs of the time, David does not seek to destroy the descendants of the previous lineage, but, surprisingly, seeks an heir to the house of Saul to honor and show loyalty. The sun rose over Jerusalem, reflecting off the city walls and illuminating the palace halls where David, the king of Israel, pondered his promise to Jonathan, the loyal friend who once shared battles and oaths of covenant. David's heart, even adorned with the royal crown, was still guided by principles rare in his time. In a rare display of loyalty, David decided not only to preserve the lineage of Saul, the former king, but also to honor the alliance made with Jonathan. The memory of his war friend echoed in his mind, and he felt the responsibility to fulfill the pact established in the days when their lives intertwined on the battlefield. The king summoned his counselors and inquired about Jonathan's descendants. The search for Saul's family began, not as a relentless hunt, but as a journey of fulfilling promises. Among the records and reports, the name of Mephibosheth emerged, like a pearl hidden in the annals of history. 2 Samuel chapter 9. David, in his search, is informed by Ziba, a former servant of the house of Saul, about the existence of Mephibosheth, who lived as a fugitive in Lodebar. Here, the story reveals a moment of prejudice, as Ziba highlights Mephibosheth's physical condition. However, David, going beyond the standards of the time, decides to bring Mephibosheth to the court, demonstrating a compassion that defies social expectations. The news of the royal visit reverberated through the dusty streets, reaching the ears of the crippled young man, who could hardly believe the turnaround that was taking place in his life. As Mephibosheth prepared to meet the king, he remembered the stories told about David, a man whose heart sought justice and mercy. He questioned himself about the reason for such royal attention towards his humble existence, but the answer was stored in higher designs. The meeting between David and Mephibosheth occurred at a moment that transcends expectations. The king looked into the eyes of Jonathan's descendant and, instead of rejecting the physical frailty that marked him, David saw beyond the scars and declared words that would echo in history. "Do not be afraid, for I will benefit you for Jonathan's sake, your father, and I will restore to you all the lands of Saul your father, and you will always eat bread at my table." 2 Samuel 9 verse 7. Jonathan's memory guided David to act with generosity and grace. Mephibosheth, surprised by the king's kindness, bowed before the royal majesty, not just as a land beneficiary, but as a member of the restored royal family. The chapter of Mephibosheth's life entered a new phase, marked by redemption and the fulfillment of ancient promises. As David stretched out his hand towards Mephibosheth, the echo of the words spoken resounded not only in the palace room, but in eternity, announcing that, even in the midst of human limitations, divine faithfulness and mercy can restore what was lost. Mephibosheth's story, intertwined with David's compassion, continued to unfold, revealing that the marks of the past can be transformed into testimonies of redemption. The news of David's benevolence toward Mephibosheth spread throughout Jerusalem like the sweet scent of incense. The invitation for Mephibosheth to sit at the royal table, sharing the banquet that previously seemed like a distant dream, became the topic of conversation among the city's inhabitants. On the night marked by the reunion, the royal palace shone with lights and joy. Mephibosheth, dressed in royal attire, was led to the halls where royalty gathered for sumptuous banquet. His eyes, accustomed to the simplicity of Lodebar, shone with the splendor of the royal surroundings. Upon entering the room, Mephibosheth felt the presence of King David, whose warm gaze confirmed the promise of a new life. The table was richly decorated, filled with delicacies that once seemed unattainable to the crippled young man. The feeling of belonging, of being welcomed at the king's table, transcended the physical barriers that limited him. The royal banquet was not just a feast of exquisite food, but a powerful symbol of restored communion. Mephibosheth was no longer on the margins of society, hiding in Lodebar. He was sitting at the royal table, sharing laughter, stories, and joy with the king's family. During the banquet, David, in his generosity, highlighted Mephibosheth not as someone marked by tragedy, but as an heir to the promise made to Jonathan. The king and the cripple shared not only fine bread and wine, but also a connection of restored hearts. The royal table, once distant and unattainable, has become a place of grace and acceptance. As the guests toasted reconciliation and redemption, Mephibosheth realized that the story of his life, intertwined with divine mercy, was far from a tale of suffering, but rather a living testimony to the transformation that can occur when grace meets grace. Faith. The news of the royal banquet and the restoration of Mephibosheth echoed throughout Israel, inspiring hearts with the message that the past does not determine the future and that, in the presence of the king, limitations are overcome by the abundance of grace. Mephibosheth's life, now intertwined with David's kingship, was not without challenges. While enjoying the benefits of the royal table, he faced the complexities of his new position. The murmurs and suspicious looks of some courtiers echoed in the palace corridors, questioning the presence of the cripple at the king's table. David, aware of the tensions that arose, remained firm in his decision to honor the alliance made with Jonathan. He saw in Mephibosheth not only a legal heir, but a symbol of loyalty and compassion. Amid adversity, David extended his protection over Mephibosheth, reaffirming his position in the royal lineage. However, the challenges were not limited to palace intrigue. Mephibosheth, with his physical condition, faced daily the limitations imposed by his disabilities. Each step was a constant reminder of his vulnerability. responsibility, but also an opportunity to exercise the courage that was manifesting in his heart. On one of these challenging days, as Mephibosheth walked through the palace gardens, he discovered unlikely allies and friendships that transcended social and physical barriers. Servants became his companions on the journey, challenging the preconceived narrative of what it meant to be royalty. Amid challenges and alliances, Mephibosheth learned to trust David's faithfulness. The king not only fulfilled his promise to Jonathan, but continued to extend his benevolence, turning obstacles into opportunities to reveal the greatness of divine grace. Mephibosheth's story, marked by twists, tragedies, and redemption, reflected the truth that alliances made in the darkest days can flourish in the light of hope. As he faced the challenges of his condition and the uncertainties of the future, Mephibosheth discovered that, in the company of the merciful king, his story continued to unfold in unpredictable ways. The plot thickens when Ziba, Saul's former servant, betrays Mephibosheth during Absalom's revolt. When presenting provisions to David, Ziba also falsely accuses Mephibosheth of plotting to regain the throne. This betrayal results in the loss of all of Mephibosheth's properties, who, by defending his innocence before David, reveals not only his loyalty, but his willingness to give up his inheritance for the sake of the king's peace and security. Years passed, and the story of Mephibosheth became an indelible part of the story of life in Israel. His journey, from the obscurity of Lodebar to David's royal table, echoed in the hearts of those who heard of the cripple who became a restored prince. Mephibosheth, now an adult, not only enjoyed the privileges of royalty but also took an active role in David's court. His wisdom, forged from life's experiences, became a valuable source of advice for the king and those who sought guidance. The cripple of Lodebar, once marginalized, now occupied a place of honor and influence. David's benevolence not only changed Mephibosheth's life, but also impacted the culture of the kingdom. The practice of showing mercy to the vulnerable and honoring covenants has become a deep-rooted tradition in society. The story of the king who restored a crippled heir was told from generation to generation as a reminder of the power of grace and compassion. Mephibosheth, aware of his own fragility, became an advocate for the marginalized and a voice for those who were forgotten. He established initiatives to care for those in need, inspiring others to follow David's example, building a nation where justice and mercy went hand in hand. At the height of his legacy, Mephibosheth also found love and companionship. A courageous woman, touched by the story of the cripple who became noble, shared not only her life but also her ideals. Together they formed a family that reflected the diversity and beauty of restorative grace. The cripple of Lodebar, whose story began amid the ruins of defeat, now became a living symbol that, in the presence of the king of benevolence, desolation can blossom into gardens of hope. Mephibosheth's scars were not just physical marks, but testaments to the extraordinary journey that led him from a forgotten city to a place of prominence in the heart of the kingdom. As Mephibosheth's days progressed, he looked back with gratitude, forward with expectation, and upward with reverence. His life, marked by King David's compassionate touch, continued to echo like a melody of redemption, reminding everyone that, even in the most unlikely places, divine grace can transform someone's story. When we learn the story of Mephibosheth, we are reminded that life is a journey of tragedies and triumphs, of defeats and redemptions. The trajectory of the cripple of Lodebar resonates like an eternal echo, echoing the truth that our greatest scars can become the starting points for extraordinary journeys. Mephibosheth was not defined by his physical limitation, but rather by the grace that found him in the darkest moments of his existence. His story, marked by David's generosity, reveals that compassion can transform destinies, and alliances made in days of adversity can blossom into harvests of hope. As we contemplate the pages of this narrative, we are challenged to see beyond appearances, to transcend self-imposed limitations, and to embrace the idea that, even in the most challenging situations, divine providence can change the course of our lives. Mephibosheth, the cripple who became a restored prince, leaves us with a profound reflection on the transformative capacity of love and loyalty. His story encourages us to seek grace in our own journeys, to extend a hand of compassion to those around us, and to believe that, in life's upheavals, we can find redemption and purpose. Let the story of Mephibosheth be a reminder that even when we seem to be lost in our own Lodebars, there is a real table of opportunities before us. May we, like Mephibosheth, walk towards the light of hope, confident that, in the hands of the merciful King, the most unlikely stories can transform into extraordinary testimonies.